All right, welcome back to Redacted, episode 2. I'm your host, David Shaner, and I'm here with Taylor Kotner. And we got another packed agenda for today. So, Taylor, I realized something after we recorded the first episode, and I hit the end button, and that's that I'm a terrible hype guy. We just jump in, and I didn't really bother telling anybody who's listening to this why they should even care what we have to say or think that we know any more than a random person floating around on LinkedIn. So I wanted to ask you before we jump into the fun part of the episode, why should people even listen to us? Why should they care what we have to say?
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily like history of like jobs or whatever. I think personally, I just like really like technology and keeping up with it and trying it all. And I think that overlapped with the fact that we both work together on offline and are using this on a real business in like ways that are, which you'll see later, breaking and not fun ways for me right now. And then also working in really fun ways, like you saw last week with the whole redoing of the partners app stuff. I think it's just willingness to share and try new things and just like get into the weeds with people.
I think because I have a hat on that says dangerously skip permissions, you should automatically trust that I know what I'm doing.
Our first merch.
Our first merch. No, I wanted to quickly show the offline compression story, which I think just gives a little more flavor to what you said. I mean, the TLDR is when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. And we were running a company that had 34 full-time employees plus a whole bunch of contractors, service providers. It was like, decent size. And the business model didn't scale. And so we had to go all the way from 34 full-time to 2 full-time and 2 part-time, which is a crazy amount of compression. And the business still operates the same as it did for the most part. We have almost 600 restaurants that offline works with, almost 10,000 paying subscribers. This visual that is up on the screen is our accountability chart that I unearthed from almost 2 years ago. It felt like going through the ruins of an ancient civilization or something. But I mean, this is a lot of boxes, right? And so I think that, to your point, necessity is the mother of invention. Both of us were already on the front foot with AI before the company scaled back, but this presented us with, I think, a really unique opportunity to take all this stuff that floats around on the internet and like, you have to make it work or the business is going to fail. And so I think that's allowed us to do a tremendous amount of testing. And like, I guess you're going to show today, like, stuff doesn't always work. And that is just as valuable as when it does work, because you learn what's true and what's BS and stuff. So that's my attempt to give us some credibility. All right, what have you been working on?
We've talked about you teeing up the original problem. And what I want to show initially is this cleanup and like agent system that we've been thinking about and how it's been evolving. That started off last year with like this series of wild N8N flows that just like, again, never worked, but kind of worked. And then we ended up just being like, well, stuff's not ready. Like the models aren't there. The technology's not there. So
since I already have this org chart up, I'll just do it this way. So if I go over to the left-hand side of this, most of these org charts, it's like you got sales and marketing, operations, finance, and HR. Those are kind of the 3 big things. And when we had a larger team and we were selling to restaurants, we had this whole kind of lead gen function, which a lot of, basically, if you're doing any sort of sales, you have a lead gen function. And so these lead gen people were they were basically accountable for three things. There was lead research. So who are we going to reach out to? And since offline, we have kind of a curated opinion of what restaurants are worth going to and which aren't. You can't just blindly reach out to everybody. So there was a fairly significant research and qualification piece to this. And then there was, we have this tiny little thing called HubSpot management, which is actually like anybody who's ever, yeah, it's absurd, right? Anybody who's ever managed a CRM knows that in order to do this business development function well, and then if I come over here and I kind of look at the account executives and partnership managers and partnerships admins, all of that sits on this foundation of who are we reaching out to, why are we reaching out to them, and like the management of the CRM. And so let's see, last August, I started trying to rebuild a lot of these processes in N8N. And I can show real quick.
And I think like while you're pulling that up, I think like an important piece of this that like I want to make sure that I don't forget is that a lot of the stuff that I'm doing now was based on the rules that you had to work through, the extremely complicated rules that you had to work through to come up with the fact that here's what a lead gen from start to end looks like if we were to have a person do it or something like that. And that's what we've been trying to translate forever.
Yeah, so I'll just pull up a couple of these. Let me get lead gen. Let me get qualification. Let me get that crazy company one. So some of these are kind of simple, but like this is something most businesses have, right? There's an inbound lead. We used Typeform for it. Somebody fills out a Typeform. And this is kind of an example of what one of these workflows would look like. You get an inbound Typeform. You have to check if it even has valid data. And then what a human used to do is try to classify the lead. Like, what even is it? Is it a restaurant? Is it an event? Which city is it in? What type of restaurant is it? And because all of that would end up mattering for qualification and stuff later. And so this is a relatively simple workflow that just automated that piece and kind of outsourced the classification and the human parts of it to an AI model, and then shoved it all into HubSpot and alerted the team. So that's one, right? Another one that we used to tell people is, hey, if you want to know like what restaurants are opening up or what's cool in a city, just go read the blogs. So one of the best ones, shout out Triangle Food Blog. I'm sure he's listening to this. But we basically fetch the RSS feed from his website. We parse it all out. We use AI to say, read this whole article, extract out anything in here that could look like a lead, put it all inside of HubSpot, classify again. And then we move on to qualification. Everybody does some form of qualification. So we grab it out. We take the thing that was just created in HubSpot, pull it back out of HubSpot, qualify it based on our unique criteria, do some enrichment, shove it back into HubSpot. And then this is the part that kind of, oh, thanks, Whisper. Got a free day of Whisper Pro. This is the crazy one, because this is where it starts to intersect with HubSpot, which creates like all of the difficult challenges that we have. Like before, we were just storing data in HubSpot, but then you have to answer this question of, okay, so a restaurant's opening, or there was news about a restaurant. What's our relationship to that restaurant? Have we worked with them before? Are they part of a larger group? Do we have a record for them, like a company record and contact records, or do we need to create them from scratch? And this is where it just, N8N's really nice for, like, it's nice that I can pull this up and I can show it to you. And it's nice that you can audit what's going on. What's not nice about it is that there's still a fair amount of like deterministic flow to it. And so I ended up becoming like the shepherd of all the N8N flows and having to fix them. And Claude Code was actually not super helpful, because Claude Code had to go into N8N's world and try to modify things and read these giant workflows, which would blow out the context window. and pull them down locally and grep through them. And it kind of became a really messy game of telephone. Um, Although, to your point, this validated that each of these steps was possible. And when I was watching them closely, they worked more often than not. When I stepped away from them, I was unable to kind of let the system run itself, right?
Yeah, like it's
Which is
like
the
a
dream of any.
Tamagotchi. It's like
Yeah,
the
that's
current
right.
world of like, hey, how many AI bots do you have running? That's how many Tamagotchis you have to keep alive. Which
That's right.
one do you want to keep alive the
That's
most?
right. And this one, I don't know that it died, but it was not healthy after a little
It's like,
while, right?
yeah, yeah. Okay. Thank you. So, I think I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I'm currently failing at doing this in a way. So let me show you what I have right now that I'm working with. This is the thing that I ended up with after I would say 2-ish weeks in March. Uh, just kind of going back and forth of, and this actually doesn't do a bad job right now. It took a long time to get here, but this is cleaning up a company in HubSpot. And again, this might sound super boring, but without a clean company in HubSpot, you don't know who they are connected to. You don't know when a lead comes in, if we have a long running history with them because they've been connected to a bunch of different companies we work with, or if they open up a new location and we track that. We need to be able to plug that location into a clean HubSpot company to make a deal for our salesperson to focus on. And that this is the foundation of everything else. I'm pretty sure that the rest of the stuff, like cleaning a lead all the way through, will now be easier because of this, but I've not cracked this yet. And what you're looking at on screen right now is basically a multi-agent LLM flow. And my restriction currently is that I have to have it running on Claude Code, just because it just kind of gets a little bit expensive. But that's something that I think we'll eventually have to talk about, which is to have these things running massively in parallel. I don't think we would need to do that often, but API key might be more efficient and faster than the Claude Code stuff. So there's that always forever cost versus efficiency. If we spend $1,000 or $2,000 a month on tokens, does that actually add up to the same value of what a person could do or what some other system could do? So this, again, really quickly, this system looks at a proxy database of HubSpot, so it doesn't have to burn a bunch of tokens on calls, which is what N8N definitely had to do, right? It had to get all the information from HubSpot. But if we can put that information into a format that it doesn't have to make a bunch of API calls, the system that I'm building will have that pre-made API call. We can label these things as code, right? So it just gathers something about a deal ID. It classifies the complexity because it sees the initial hooks and the edges of if you think about it as a graph database or something, you have all the nodes of the companies and the contacts and the deals, and those are all connected together. You can classify whether or not it's one company linked to one deal or 6 companies linked to 15 deals and a bunch of restaurant locations. And that just does some slightly different stuff with the prompts. And then it kind of decomposes the large structures, because what the LLM needs to do is it needs to kind of do an audit about the summary, the cluster it got. And the kind of unlock to making this work was not passing stuff from LLM to LLM in JSON. I don't know if this is ultimately gonna work. Maybe it's not, because it's not working great right now. But it kind of goes through and it says, if me, Taylor, was going through this HubSpot thing, I would have a very specific list of is this connected? Is this parent thing hooked up properly? Is this deal created for this? So it just analyzes it and tells the next one, which is the web researcher, which is also, the web researcher takes the companies and locations found, and it just does some research on the fact that to know if these locations are right. right? So let's say a restaurant has 5 locations in Raleigh and Durham. It's going to make sure that all those are right. Or maybe there's a 6 that we don't have in HubSpot because the data we put in a HubSpot is really old. From here, there's an LLM architect, which starts to think through the it's so yeah. I like basically labeled this for me this like little flow chart. It's very N8N like, but much faster development cycle. So like the LLM can read the research and the evidence directly from the 2 previous LLMs. It'll draw me an ASCII tree of the before and after of like here's what here's what it is before, here's what it's going to look like after, and it's not a great view right now, but and then it just lists the changes in this kind of like LLM language that I told it to make. So it's not wrapping a ton of stuff in JSON, which is just extra tokens and characters, I think. And so, but however, then you need one more translation of, hey, I'm going to take the plan from the architect and I'm going to generate a bunch of commands that can actually work in HubSpot that an API can do, because we don't necessarily need the LLM making a bunch of HubSpot commands. And then this goes into a validator that knows exactly how the commands need to be formatted in JSON. Just in case something goes wrong, it can go back to the design structure and give it some feedback. And this one failed once, and then it made it on the second try. And then it just goes to a human gate, right? And I click approve, and it should theoretically like clean up this thing in HubSpot, right? Like if I approve it, I don't know what's going to happen. But this is the TLDR of this, and this kind of worked, but it's one at a time. And I have to watch every one of our like 500 to 600 customers, let alone the ones that are not customers, every single time. And since this one had 5 failed, and so what I would want is for it to learn. And so, you know, we had to focus on other things. So I moved over to this, which is basically the same thing. But yesterday I started like having, AI existential crisis, as most people do when they're working on things like this, which is like, this will never work. I don't know. Why am I even doing this? And ultimately what I realized that I wanted was just like a long running loop going through it and having it fix them for me. But if it had any questions, I just wanted to talk to me and be like, hey, I don't know if this is actually like a location. Can you just like, is this right, Taylor? But that's where I am, and I don't have any great solutions for that. But I've talked a lot. So like, what is this bringing up for you? Like
PTSD of N8N, and of all the AI existential crises that I've gone through. We may have to bleep this, but is it working on Metis that's making you think about wanting to chat with it?
Yeah, like yeah, it is. It's that idea that
Is this
you're
just a super skill that you chat with? Is that like
I maybe, yeah, like I think there's a world where that is the thing that does make it work, and I tried to have it copy it actually. But I think I maybe had it do too much by like making a queue so that I can just press start worker and it would just go through the queue and ping me whenever it was stopped, but it wouldn't keep going until I answered it. And then when it would, some recent sessions, it looks like there's some actually completed ones, which, okay. I had it working on it this morning. But then there were these lessons that I wanted it to learn, to where if something went wrong during it and I corrected it, I wanted a lesson to then have an agent go, you learned something. I'm going to create a PR to update the skill that this system uses. Right? Because this is another one of those like holy grail things that just like doesn't work super well right now, which is when someone that's not me or you is using these systems and they want to change it, they just can't.
Yeah.
Right? Because like if they did, they could potentially break it in ways that are unfixed, harder to fix. But I wanted a way for it to learn from the person doing it and then be able to push something to a repo that someone could review. That there's no learnings in this one because like all these are right, and I don't think it's working well enough for it to extract these learnings. But this is what I ultimately want, is just a queue. Let's again, just like I started a long time ago with just a queue of things and trying to go through each one and have it fix it. And I feel like I'm closer, but I don't know if I'm at 80% and I have 20% left, or I'm at 20% and I have 80% left.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I I had written down two things while you were talking. One was, do you still feel confident in the trade-off of developing this locally versus using N8N?
I think the thing that's starting to feel like a little handcuffy is the reason we were trying to build it like this was to use Claude Code to do it. Right. And NNN does not use Claude Code. It just, right. It can't. And so I do feel like if I was going to do the agent SDK stuff, I would be thinking about it differently and being like, oh, I guess if I just had, $5,000 to try to build the system, like I probably could do it. I don't know how much money it would be after that, but I did hook up like you can use the agent SDK right now in this. But I had to kill I had to kill my API key yesterday because like it burned through like $30 and I wasn't even sure what it was doing. And that was one of those things where I was like, okay, like if I'm going to build on the agent SDK, there's like real monetary consequences to like not really digging deep into like the exact things that are happening along the way. And maybe that's good.
Yeah.
Because I did realize that I think Sonnet can do this and it doesn't need to be Opus, right? And there's some things that like Haiku could maybe do. And so you start thinking about building it in a way different way when you are trying to optimize for like value and like return on like your investment, but in time and the amount of money of tokens that it's spending.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, I think there's no solutions, only trade-offs, right? The other thing I wrote down was I wrote CRM self-aware, and what it was making me think about is that every CRM is just chronically out of date and disconnected and messy. I mean, I feel like you could literally go to any company and open up any CRM and they'd be like, oh, well, that one's not quite right. But it's like this thing happened that it doesn't have, or yeah, I forgot to put that in there. So at a meta level, all we're trying to do for offline is build a way to keep the CRM up to date all the time and
Somewhat clean, right? Like at
somewhat
least have the
clean.
things connected in the proper way, which again turns out to be very challenging because you just need to know, you have to have a lot of context about the salty donut has Atlanta as Austin and Charlotte and Orlando. Like they're everywhere, which is
Yeah.
like, not a super normal thing for our clients, but that's a thing that now has to be taken into consideration when having the LLM clean it up, which is, oh, just make sure that like, yeah, it can be linked to a parent company, but this is everywhere. And maybe you don't care about the one in Seattle right now, if there is one, right? But you might. And so should we put it in? I don't know. Like, I actually don't know. Maybe. But there's just so many little decisions that have to go along the way.
And the reason we're doing this is because we still have this I guess it's still strongly held, but maybe we'll change our approach. But the belief that in order to do all the other things we want to do, which would be sophisticated outbound outreach to these restaurants that's automated by AI, or really good, uh, email marketing that's kind of disguised as outbound. For example, being able to email a prospect and say, hey, we just signed these 3 restaurants that are just like yours. In order to do things like that, you have to know what just like yours means. Like, we still think that the data needs to be clean underneath. I think what this is making me think of is like, maybe we beat our head against the wall a little bit longer on this, and then maybe we actually flip and take the top down approach versus, data up is bottom up versus top down, of like, let's just take, 10 places that Triangle Food Blog just wrote about and see if we can draft the outreach and try it that direction again and see. So basically kind of approaching it from both bookends.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like N8N or Claude Code or Claude SDK or anything else, the hard thing we're trying to do is take a place like the Salty Donut, because let's say we just found out they're opening a new location in Chapel Hill, and figure out the objective reality of what that represents. Is it a restaurant group? Is it a multi-location restaurant? How many locations? What are the addresses? Which are the ones that are open? Which have yet to open? When do they probably open? That's the objective reality. And then make HubSpot match that objective reality and have all the right linkings and preserve all of our data if we've had a relationship with them in the past and stuff. And these steps that you've got laid out, gather, classify, decompose, analyst, researcher, architect, those are all like multi-step processes to get that right. And like,
yeah,
we still right? For one individual one, but we do know that if you or I, if it was our job, if it was like, hey, you have to update the Salty Donut, like we would be able to do it. It's possible. There is an objective reality. We could Google enough stuff. We could cross-reference enough stuff to get that ASIC tree that you showed me correct. And then we could go into HubSpot and we could make all the updates. So this is a possible thing that the AI is trying to impersonate. And we're just trying to put enough shape around it to make it correct most of the time. And it just turns out to be really freaking hard.
Yeah. So hopefully I'll have some updates, in the next couple. Like I'm mainly focused on this and one other project right now. So, okay. What's your show and tell this week?
All right. I'm back to shareholder updates. I have to operate under the assumption that no one listened to our first episode. So let me like rehash like where we are with this. So, I'm still the CEO of Offline. We still have shareholders. I'm still responsible for shareholder updates. I hate I love talking to shareholders. I hate the process of gathering all the crap to put together the shareholder update. It's really annoying. And what that has meant is that I used to be really good about sending updates either monthly or bi-monthly. And now I've slipped into quarterly, and I'm 22 days late on Q1. And so I thought this would be a really good thing to test for Claude Code, right? So anybody that didn't listen to episode 1, that's what this is. So basically it's a skill, right? It's another one of these super skills is what I'm calling them, where there's like lots of different steps to generate something at the end. And I always put these, I have a 3-step process for creating these things. The first one is I have a process mapping skill, and I invoke that. And I just think out loud about how I create a shareholder update. And the process mapping skill helps me put it into a process. And then I have that Shaner consulting skill that I run that generates something I showed on the last podcast, which is on the left-hand column, all the processes that have to happen, on the right-hand column, all the context that you need. And I decided to, I'll show the output in a second, but what I decided here was to visualize what has to come together to do a shareholder update successfully on the context side. Because I want to put this in perspective for anybody that's listening that has to do any kind of external stakeholder or internal stakeholder updating, because it's all very similar. So in order to, I don't know.
It's a little hard to read.
Really hard to read. What did AI do here? Come on, Claude. Here, let me highlight it. So shareholder update breaks out into what do we write about? How do we write it? And who do we send it to? Those are basically the 3 things for any report or update. And the reason the shareholder update one is hard is because it breaks out into a bunch of stuff, right? So I've got like a mermaid diagram here. And what do we write about, right? It basically means, what did the company do in Q1? So you've got financials, you've got product metrics, or like marketplace metrics, how many restaurants, how many members. You've got GitHub commits, you've got board notes, you've got our VTO goals, you've got team and people. And so part of the benefit of trying to execute a skill like this is that you have to hook up all these different data sources so for Claude to know how we did in Q1 and how that fits into our overall story, I dumped 4 things in. I dumped an export of our QuickBooks P&L, just gave up on the API, just exported it, dropped it in. I dumped in our Gusto payroll. I dumped in Ramp vendors, and then Stripe revenue I got from you. And like when I gave Claude those 4 things, it was like, oh, I know exactly what's going on with this business, right? Because it also had all of my, if I go back down here, it had how do we write about it? It went and read all of my previous updates. So it hit my Gmail API, went and found the last 3 updates, ingested those so that it has a story that's missing the next chapter, but it kind of knows, right, what happened. And then it has this thing for team and people. So it knows who's full-time, who's part-time, what's the story around that transition, what's our goal for the year. I store all of our board meeting transcripts in a folder. And then I went back and had it look at our GitHub commits since January 1st to like see what we worked on. And then who do we send it to? I have 2 Google Sheets that it now has access to. So sometimes, I'm sure this resonates. Like sometimes when I'm doing something like this, by the time I'm done with the skill, I'm like, geez, dude, I could have just written the freaking shareholder update.
Yeah,
like,
right.
why did I do all of this? And I'm sure a lot of people, I'll hear, I hear this everywhere where it's like, oh, I worked on AI for like a week straight and it sent an email for me. And it's like, okay, you could have just sent that email. But I think in my head, and what I wanted to visualize here is that the more you hook up these systems, and like in the shareholder update, I also made a registry of all these systems. So it's like, hey, here's what we use Ramp for, and here's what you should look in there for, right? So if I go over here and I open up the skill, let me show you what this looks like. So this is the shareholder update folder. And in that folder, I have 4 buckets. And this is how the Shaner consulting skill builds skills. So it has one bucket called context, and context is where it goes to grab everything. So it's got an email design context that tells it what the email should look like. It's got a data sources markdown file, context markdown file, API patterns. This is all just stuff that's like how you pull in context to do this. Improvement is kind of like what you were talking about a second ago. How do we learn every time we run it and store that somewhere? Right now, it's literally just an ideas.md, but I could turn it into something more sophisticated. Prompts is so, you always have to fact check the prompts that it's using. And then data is where it spits things out. Okay, so if I go over here and I preview this, let me make this, yeah, okay. So this is with no edits from me. This is what it said. So hey, first name. So it already has it formatted for yet another mail merge because it read previous formats. Quick update on Q1. Last time I wrote, we were about to make some big structural changes to how we operate. This update is about what happened after we did. Highlights from Q1. Number 1, March was our first profitable month at the operating level. So then it lays out all the exact from our P&L metrics on what happened. It knows that me and you moved to part-time. Steve and Paige stayed full-time. I didn't tell it that, right? Because it had the board meeting transcript, right? Yeah. It had the P&L. So it was able to say, hey, profitability, that's a big deal. That's what you guys talked about in the board meeting. I can see it in the numbers. Let me write this paragraph for you. It also had the information on revenue. It pulled this from GitHub. So you and Paige did 400 commits across
Right.
12 different repos. It also put in there
Yeah.
worth noting, Taylor is not an engineer.
Yeah.
He's a
I'll take that
product
as a
leader.
compliment.
That's right. That's right. No, it was crushing on you. It says he's a product leader who codes with AI. His 259 commits this quarter
Cool.
are kind of crazy, right?
You should have seen it yesterday. It was being really mean to me yesterday. Claude Opus 4.7. It was like, hey, that last one, that was a bad idea. I was like, all right, you're not wrong.
Yeah, watch me switch to Codex. So it also picked up, I had forgotten about this, that you did that proof of concept for card linked offers, right? And it knew from our VTO, hey, we have 3 big goals this year. One of them is to explore card linked offers. So it was like, oh, interesting. We already kind of did a little bit of that. Let me put that in the update. So I thought this was incredible. It picked up the restaurant count low light because it compared the number of redemption locations to the last update. And it was like, oh, there's some attrition here. So it was pretty solid in terms of output. There are, of course, a word here, a word there that I might mess with, but I'm going to keep 95% of this. This is literally like semantic tweaks at this point. And so, yeah, this one I thought super cool demonstration of a really context heavy problem that me a year ago, I would have said, Claude, let's do a shareholder update. And it would have said, well, where does your VTO live? Where's the board meeting notes? Where's, how do I have access to all these different things? And the more you lay down these building blocks, like in my chief of staff repo, the more you give it access to all these different things. I think the easier it becomes to like layer in more and more complex stuff like this.
Yeah. Very cool. Like, it's also not 5 or 20 pages long. Like, it's also one of those things. It's like, oh, someone could read this in 5 minutes and get up to date on what we did in the entire quarter. And, cool.
Yeah. So I thought that was pretty neat. So yeah, if you're doing stuff like this, right, just trying to figure it out every day, and you don't mind screen sharing and talking through it, we plan on having guests on pretty frequently, I think, in the future, and have some fun and hopefully learn some stuff along the way. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Later.